So the sons went after the daughters. That this type of worship went after this type of spirit. And what happens when this type of, a pure type of worship goes after basically a carnally based spirit? That this type of worship starts to degrade. Okay? No longer is there a solid connection between the human and the Creator. There's no longer a link between our realm and the realm of Elohim. Okay? So this starts to take place. Things start to really go bad. There begins to be a really, really strong growing rift between humankind and Elohim. The Torah says that Elohim gave Noah 100 years to build the ark. The book of Yashar says that it was 120 years to build the ark. So 120 years, the gematria of 120, or the gematria of the word Samek, if we spell it out, is 120. So instead of Elohim surrounding, something was happening. The gematria of 100, or the numerical value of 100, is Kaf, which means separate. So instead of being surrounded by Elohim, instead of being surrounded by the spirit of Elohim, humankind began to separate away. And in verse 3 of chapter 6 of Bereshit, Elohim says, I will not abide with man forever. The spirit of Elohim said, I will not abide with Adam forever, because he is flesh. Let his years be 120. Okay? In other words, it also represents now the lifespan of humankind. What does this have to do with anything? When our relationship with Elohim starts to degrade and his spirit lifts off, we become frail, weak, mortal. We come to a point where we are going to die. And death is inevitable. Now, Noah comes along. Noah is rest. That something has to happen for us. Something has to happen to fix this situation. So Elohim tells Noah to build an ark, the Tevat. Now, the ark, we've said, is a representation of the Word. So he builds this ark. How many people go into the ark? You say 8 go into the ark. You take 8 and the ordinal value of Samek is 15, multiply those, that there's life to be found surrounded by the Word if we will simply step into it. 8 people. Again, 8, Chet. The idea is that if we will yoke ourselves, bond ourselves to the Word, then the Spirit of Elohim will once again surround us. Okay? This is what's going to save us from the flood. Now, we talked about the flood in our little game that we played. We said push away from the table and stand. But then we said there was a rabbinical interpretation to push away from the table and stand, that you had to push away from the table 3 paces and then put your right hand on your right leg and your left hand on your left leg and bend your elbows at 45 degrees, push up with your left leg first and then with your right leg. In other words, halakha complicates the simplicity of Torah. The church fathers said you don't have to do all that Jewish stuff. simply believe that you're standing and you'll stand in the name of Jesus. But they said, but if you do have to stand, you only have to go away 2 steps from the table, and you don't have to place your hands on your knees. You can simply stand up after you spin the chair to the right. Okay? What are we getting here? We have the church fathers. We have takanot, rabbinical decrees, that here comes the pure word of Torah. It's the rain. Rain doesn't kill anybody. The pure word falls down and it hits the dirt and it becomes muddled and dirty and it becomes something that's unrecognizable from the rain. It becomes the doctrines, the dogmas, the takanot that start to rise up with a massive effect. And it's this that puts people in over their heads to where they can no longer breathe in the spirit of Elohim and they can no longer feel the word that's falling on them. This is what kills them in the flood. The thing that could save them is the thing that ultimately killed them. Now, they go into the ark. He's told to build this ark. He gives the directions for the length, the width, and the height. That within the ark are instructions on how to walk with Elohim, how to grow with Elohim, and how to learn and be guided by Elohim. Okay? Length, width, height. Also within the ark are what? Clean and unclean animals. Interesting thing about clean and unclean animals in the story of Noah and the ark is that the Levitical laws had not yet been given. So how do you know what animals were clean and what animals were unclean? We miss something here in that what we need to understand is the things that are not of Elohim and the things that are from Elohim, that we need to learn how to take care of both of them and how to be able to discern the difference between what is right and what is not right. This is what happens when we enter into the ark. When we enter into the Word, we learn more than simply a whole bunch of commandments. We learn to love our neighbor as ourselves. We learn not to murder. That it doesn't mean simply to kill somebody. Murder is to intentionally take a life, or it's to intentionally harm somebody with the words of your mouth. It's the same thing. We learn how to treat other people. We learn how not to steal. We learn how not to covet. We learn how to be happy with what we have. It's within Torah. We learn that we need to establish courts of law. We learn that we have to act a certain way in order to enforce the negative. So we have to learn the negative and the positive. We have the lower level, which we said was knowledge. We come to a knowledge. Spending 150 days in the ark, you grow wisdom. You go up to the next level. There were 3 levels. The last level is understanding, in that you now know how to apply the word to your life. The next thing that you see is the window that allows the light to come in. Now, we have something that happens afterwards. It comes to rest on Ararat. 40 days and 40 nights it rains. 40 is the number of what? Transition. Transition. Going from one state to another. Now, we say 40 days and 40 nights. Okay? 40 days and 40 nights doesn't equal 80. It simply equals 40 days and 40 nights. But 80 is relative to this. Say 40 and 40 is what? 80. What has a numerical value of 80? It's in your Torah.
Mount, voice, word.
Pay, which represents what? Bruce just said it.
Mount, voice, and word.
Voice, word. Okay, so what allows this transition to take place? The word. The word being able to, in this transition, going from a state, a pre-flood state, to where we were separated from Elohim, to once again being surrounded by His Word and being sensitive to being able to hear His voice. Okay? It's relative in this idea. Now, we say they were in the ark 150 days. We say 150 days. What do we see in 150?
50 is life.
Okay, so 50 is noon. It means life. And then 100 is again kof. So what do we see taking place in 150 days? That the separation that caused life to cease outside the ark is doing what? It's bringing life back together. And now our life is not separated from Elohim, but it is set apart to Elohim. When we enter into the Word, and when we believe and receive the instruction that comes from Elohim, in other words, the instruction, when we believe His Torah, it goes more than simply believing Brit Hadashah and the words of Yeshua. Yeshua didn't say anything that was any different than what was in the Torah. He spoke the Torah, He spoke the prophets, He spoke the writings. Some people freak out because He also referred back to, it wasn't the Talmud yet, but He referred back to Talmudic ideas within the Sermon on the Mount. So He wasn't saying anything new. He wasn't saying anything that had not already been taught prior to this. So we are set apart to Elohim. We're not separated from Him when we enter in the Torah into study, when we enter in prayer, when we spend time in praise. We are setting ourselves apart to Him. We are joining to Him. Okay? So the next thing that we read about is, I'm going to erase a little of this, is that at the end of 40 days, after they had hung out and the rain stopped, Noah lets go of something called Horeb. In other words, he lets loose the raven. The raven goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and eventually the raven doesn't come back. But he lets it out through the light. He's come to a knowledge. He's come to wisdom. He's come to understanding. Now, he's at the window that brings in light, and he lets go of a raven. Oreb, the root of Oreb, it's a singular root, is Arav, that means darkness. Okay? It means darkness. We can allow this darkness to leave, and it's going to come back. And it's going to leave, and it's going to come back. What does it require for us to finally understand that it needs to be gone for good? Because at this point, the root of Arav is Areb, which means evening. And it's the first time in Torah that we see the ayin as the root of a word. So, in order to understand that we have this in our life, what do we need to have to be able to see the difference between is it dark or is it light? What do we need? What does ayin represent? Perception? Perception. We have to be able to perceive. What has allowed us to gain this perception? We've built the first level, the lower level. We've built the middle level. We've built the third level. We have understanding. We're standing at the light. The light shines on us. We allow this darkness to leave. Does the darkness leave us the first time? It comes back.
As we grow up.
Because just as we've talked about in the plagues, faith is always something that has to grow. Because if we have a lack of faith, then what comes out of this lack of faith? We get the frogs, the doubt. How do we get rid of this? By staying in the Word. By staying in prayer. Maintaining our relationship. Because there are times when, what we're going to see here in just a second, we have to leave the ark. But, on the other hand, he sends out something else. He sends out, I'll put it in English, well, it's spelled Yonah, but he sends out a dove. A dove. What does a dove represent? Oh, it represents peace. Represents the Ruach, the Spirit of Elohim. Okay? We're in the Word. The Spirit of Elohim goes out from us, but what does it do? It also comes back. Thing is about the raven, if we read in Torah, it's in, I think in chapter 8, that it says that it kept going out until the waters were dried up. The thing is, if we allow this thing to keep coming back into our lives, we have to understand that the water will dry up. We will eventually succumb to it.